Chapter 1 Eurozone. Can Euro economics survive Europolitics? Antonio Barroso. Introduction. As the Eurozone enters its third year of turmoil, it has become ever more obvious that politics, not economics, is driving the current uncertainty. Think of the Euro crisis as a disease. Last year, the patient survived an acute crisis. At the moment, it feels more like he's suffering from a chronic condition. But the potential for a full-blown crisis still exists, and political radicalization could become a primary source of infection. In coming months, governments in peripheral countries will struggle to implement new austerity measures, and their populations will continue to suffer the pain of spending cuts and rising unemployment. Pressure will build on politicians to veer off the reformist path prescribed by European institutions, mostly the European Commission and the European Central Bank, other eurozone states, mostly Germany, and the markets. Simultaneously, leaders in core countries will face criticism at home for financing weaker countries. The next 2 years are likely to provide the most fertile ground for populism that the European Union has ever experienced. How governments and political parties respond to this challenge will determine the future not only of the common currency, but of the entire European project. Political scientists frequently talk about critical junctures or short periods in history where there's a high probability that the institutions that have shaped political systems, like political party systems, are modified. Looking at the current course of events, the Euro crisis could well constitute one of those moments that undermine the political foundations of European democracies for years to come, and not necessarily for the better. The incumbency curse. The Eurozone crisis is not a purely economic or a purely political problem. It is the interaction between the two that is dangerous. When things are going well in Europe, as in the decade preceding the Great Recession, good economics breed positive politics and stability. For now, that trend has reversed, creating a negative feedback loop. Bad economics provokes fractious politics, which in turn exacerbates economic problems. Nothing better illustrates this problem than the fate of incumbent governments since the start of the Great Recession. Since 2010, the crisis has claimed the heads of no fewer than 6 euro area premiers, either through elections in Greece, Ireland, Portugal, Spain, and France, or through technocratic arrangements reached under extreme market pressure, as in Italy. In the current context, newly elected prime ministers can count on just 2 things. A, that their popularity will significantly decrease as they implement their policies, and B, that the probability of being re-elected at the end of their terms will be extremely low. As Jean-Claude Juncker, chief of the Eurogroup, the Euro area's finance ministers, said in 2005, "We all know what to do. We just don't know how to get re-elected after we've done it." Moreover, the incumbency curse does not seem to spare ideologies. A recent study by Josep Colomer and Pedro Magalhães of Georgetown University showed that governing parties of both the left and the right have lost elections in equal proportion since the crisis started. As the authors bluntly put it, the crisis is leading voters to show a strong willingness to fire the coach for the poor performance of their economies, even if citizens know that current governments are not fully responsible for the economic problems facing their countries. Voters are angry, and elections are their best opportunity to express that anger. So far, incumbents in peripheral countries have reluctantly swallowed austerity prescriptions, knowing that the costs of inaction, that is, being remembered as the prime minister that drove his or her country out of the euro, outweigh the costs of implementing unpopular policies, that is, political suicide in the next election. Governments in Ireland, Portugal, and Spain are pushing for fiscal and economic reform programs that have been explicitly or implicitly imposed by European institutions. And the main opposition parties in these countries have remained relatively constructive in their criticism, though not necessarily supportive, of the policies of their rivals. But the risk that populism will infect mainstream politics is rising, especially as bottom-up pressure continues to build.